everybody, and welcome back to another episode on the Double Digit Podcast. I'm your host, Humzah Ahmed, and we are joined today by two very special guests. We are joined by Rabbi Dovid Feldman and Rabbi Yisroel Dovid Weiss. Welcome to the Double Digit Podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be on the show. With God's help, we hope with God will convey to us His wisdom, and that we may sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. Amen. And Rabbi Dovid Feldman.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, thank you for coming on. It's quite an honor to have you on the podcast. So we saw you at RIS a week ago, per se, and we saw you demonstrate on a booth demonstrating anti-Zionism, and you're part of an organization called Neturei Karta International. Can you tell me more about what this organization does?
Yeah, Neturei Karta International. It's not English. It's hard for people to understand the spelling. It's Neturei Karta means Aramaic, for which the Jewish people study Torah. Part of the Torah is in Aramaic, and it means to protect the city. Neturei, protecting Karta, the city. It is a name given to the Jews who are true to our covenant with the Almighty, true to the Torah, in which we are commanded to be subservient to God. Our covenant with God was done 3,000 years ago, that we should be subservient to Him. Mm-hmm. And throughout the generations, it's these 3,000 years, we are required, and we try with God's help to remain true to the laws of God, exacting to the laws of God. And therefore, since the relatively recent advent of Zionism, which is around 130 years old, the whole concept of making a Jewish state, there have been Jews who are outspoken. Sorry about that.
No problem.
There are Jews who have been outspoken in standing as a buttress, as standing as a wall, not to let a breach into our upholding our covenant. And the ones who are standing as this wall to protect the Jewish people, that they shouldn't be affected by this rebellious movement of Zionism, which started, as I say, 130 years ago. They were referred to as the Neturei Karta, protectors of the city. I really have to say that Neturei Karta is only a name given to the ones who are very vocal, but truly around the world you will find the ones who are true to their religion, whether it is in the city of Jerusalem, Quds and Mea Shearim, right here in New York, right across from Manhattan, the most concentrated religious area, which is Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Wherever you will find around the world a very religious community, they stand in total opposition to this movement of Zionism. And it's just the ones, like a name given to people who are vocal as Neturei Karta, but it's definitely not just an opinion of this opposition to Zionism of these individuals who are outspoken with just a voice. Now, I think with God's help, I'll explain what this is, Zionism, what we're so opposed to, why we have to have a movement, in opposition.
Yeah.
And, basically, Judaism, as I said, is this covenant to be subservient to God, to uphold the Torah, and, to the letter of the law, as best of our capabilities. And the movement of Zionism, which started around 130 years ago, this is a movement that is a total transformation into a base material concept, a nationalist movement of having a piece of land, like a nation amongst other nations of the world, a piece of land, an army, an Olympic team, and so forth. It's totally trying to uproot the soul of what it means to be a Jew, to taking God out of the equation. You can be an atheist, you can be somebody who obviously who doesn't even uphold any of the laws of the Torah, can eat pork, cannot keep the 10 Commandments, and you're a fine upstanding Jew according to this new movement of Zionism, as long as you're a loyal upholder, a supporter of the UJA, the State of Israel, United Jewish People, any of their issues. And that is, of course, a total heresy, rebellion against God, and it doesn't hold stay in the Jewish law. It doesn't have anything to do with our religion. So basically, you find a state that calls itself the State of Israel, the Jewish state. They like to refer to themselves. They use all the Jewish symbols they can get their hands on: Star of David, the menorah, and they parade them with these symbols, claiming they represent the Jewish people, the Jewish law, while in truth, they're hijacking our name, all our symbols, and falsely representing the will of the Almighty, and that is part of this terrible Nakba tragedy. And I really have to let me add that the reason why it is such a diametric opposite of our covenant with God is because, as I've said, the root issue is that you don't have to. It doesn't have any connection with being subservient to God. It's a nationalism. But afterwards, it continues that in the creation of a nation state is really a rebellion, a transgression against the oath that the Jewish people were put under with the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. In other words, we were sent into the Holy Land when we made this covenant with God. God told us to go into the Holy Land. But then 1,000 years later around, when there was the destruction of the temple that was built by King Solomon, and a further temple. And then King Solomon, when he built this temple, he actually stated a prophecy which stated that once you are dispersed amongst the nations, you'll be sent out of the lands. If you will not uphold the Torah properly, then you are forbidden to return en masse. You're forbidden to return in large numbers. And there's 3 oaths. You're not allowed. You should not rebel against any nations. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we're residing. And thirdly, we are not to make any attempt to end this exile. Now, the Jews upheld this for 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple. Wow. We went through many trials and tribulations, the Inquisition, Crusade, many hardships, and yet we never attempted to return and make our sovereignty because we respect the commands of the Almighty. Judaism believes God rules the world. It wasn't our physical lacking that sent us into exile. It was because we were not on this extremely high level of holiness required of us to be in the Holy Land. And we simply have to pray to the Almighty for his compassion one day, that he will end the concept of exile, when it will be that all humanity will serve him in harmony, not become Jewish, but serve him in harmony, and then we will return with the will of humanity and serve God, and God will build the temple without any human intervention. So this difference of Judaism, the real Judaism, which is subservience to God, this covenant, and the Ersatz Judaism, this new Judaism of Zionism, is totally diametrically opposite, incompatible. It's antithetical to Zionism, to Judaism, yet they have, it seems, almost, God forbid, won the battle of having the name Judaism. And in the world, they are looked at as the representatives of our religion. They are not. They can never be. It's totally, as I say, contradictory to be subservient to God. We are not allowed to make a Jewish sovereignty at all at this period of time. Not even 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty, and not even in Palestine, but in any part of the world. The ones who are true to the religion will never accept this. And although I don't want to be long-winded, but we have to, of course, add, not leave out the elephant in the room, this would be forbidden for us, even in an empty, desolate land, uninhabited. We would never accept a Jewish state. But the fact that they create a state in a land that was inhabited, that people were living there, the large majority were Muslim, and then the Christian populace, and even a Jewish, a very God-fearing populace that were living in Palestine, and to create their Zionist state over the heads and shoulders in the land of another people. They're transgressing the laws of the Torah that states that we shall not kill, we shall not steal, and that we should be compassionate just as God is compassionate. In other words, in every aspect of this nation state, this Zionist state, it is a breach. It is a rebellion against God. It is totally unacceptable. As a Jew, because we're Jews, we stand up around the world and call out, this is illegitimate, unacceptable, and the world should denounce it, renounce it, should stand in opposition to its existence.
Wow, that was a very enlightening response. And to me, Zionism is quite a new concept or word for me. I mean, I haven't heard of it until now. It's quite interesting to hear the Jews portrayed on TV aren't actually really Jews, which is quite interesting because that's what many people assume nowadays. It's kind of sad. I'm enlightened at this point. Thank you very much. I'm wondering. So Zionism started 130 years ago, right?
Around, and the word Zionism I can explain to you. It is a word meaning Zion is referred in the words of the prophets to the city of David, which is basically Jerusalem. So the reason these same people, the ones who created the state of Israel, the ones who wanted this nation state, really were just looking for a productive, lush land somewhere to be able to develop a good country, and they were contemplating Uganda, Patagonia, and many other areas, and they only simply turned to Palestine because the efficiency and the capability of gaining mass support from around the world from unaffiliated Jews who don't know what the Torah states, that it's forbidden, and they don't, and the evangelistic Christians, which is even a larger populace around the world that looks with favor on the concept of making this Jewish homeland, because according to their belief system and so forth. So therefore they went to Palestine, although it was a much harder land to till and to develop, but it was very good convenient for their purpose of having the support that they need. So they went there. Now, you said that they're not even Jewish people. The fact is that, unfortunately, they come from Jewish parents, and the law is somebody who's born from a Jewish mother cannot release themselves from their obligation to be Jews. In other words, they are required till the day they die to return and become a proper Jew, because that's the law. But they are not practicing the Judaism. They are rebelling against God with their creation of the state.
Oh, okay. So, pretty much, they wanted to make a land, but it wasn't working out for them.
It wasn't, well, in other words, when they wanted to go to another place and then they turned to Palestine, it wasn't working out. It was that the beginning plans in order of where to go. But so they turned right away, basically, when they had a meeting in Basel, Switzerland in the 1890s, and so they turned to start their state in Palestine, and they got eventually, as people know, maybe they had the Balfour Declaration. It was after World War One. British became in control of much of the area, and therefore of that area of Palestine. They had the mandate, and they were. There was Chaim Weizmann, who was the first president of the State of Israel, and he helped Britain in World War One, and they with different technical issues, and they promised and they wanted to repay him with like a present, and he asked them to help them create a state of Israel. And there was the Balfour Declaration, which stated that they looked with favor upon the creation of a Jewish state. And the sad history goes on from there, that they were given the support and the backing and the capability of making this state. And I again note that they were from Europe. They were Zionists were from Vienna and Chaim Weizmann in Great Britain. And really the Jewish populace in Palestine was the large majority, and we have the documents for this. They were a God-fearing community. I have the documents from World War One, the German generals who were involved there. A book called Kress von Bruin made a book that is from the with the Turks to the Suez Canal, in which he writes that it's surprising to see that the overwhelming population of the Jews were 95% anti-Zionist, but they were being terrorized by the Zionists. So this is in fact there was a book review of this in the book in the Israeli paper Haaretz, and you can look at a lot of these documents that we have in a book called Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism. We put out a book, Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, Historical Documents, and you can find that in Neturei Karta on our site, NKUSA, for Neturei Karta, nkusa.org, nkusa.org. And we have, different books. One of them is the Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, and where we have the quotes and a lot of the documents of the Torah authorities, the Jews against Zionism. We even have the Zionist quotes in their documents showing how duplicitous they were. They were, hypocritical, that they supposedly speaking for Judaism and Jewish people. Well, they were totally in opposition, and they hated the religion, and they opposed the religion, and they tried to squelch and totally eradicate the religion. It sounds crazy that a Zionist, that a so-called Jewish state would be in the position of trying to oppress the religious people, but the facts are there, because this is totally not a religious concept. It is a concept of nationalism and trying to turn Judaism from religion, from subservience to God, into a basic nationalist movement.
Wow. I'm now learned of this topic. Thank you. Sorry about that. So how was Palestine like before, let's say, the Zionists came in to just disturb the peace? Because you mentioned that there were Jews, Muslims, and Christians living in that area. How was it like then?
That is such an important question, because the one of the most critical items of Zionism is to change the narrative and present the issue of the state of Israel and Palestine as a religious conflict, ingrained hate and intolerance from one to the other, especially from the Palestinian, I shouldn't say from one to the other, according to them, from the Muslims, that they're intolerant to the Jewish people, and that is so repugnant, there's no words, because in truth, and we have many old Palestinians and many old Jews, thank God they should live to 120, and their children and grandchildren, who will testify to the fact that before the advent of Zionism, Jews lived in harmony in Palestine. In every Muslim state, we had Jewish communities that flourished, and in Palestine, we lived together in the same courtyards. We babysat each other's children, our most precious objects. People gave their children to each other to babysit. We had a total harmonic coexistence with it, even though we have a distinct, different religion, a different way of serving God, but we had that was never an impediment of coexistence, and there was no United Nations, there was no human rights groups to protect us. It was totally not necessary. It was a given, just like everybody understands that here in the U.S. or in Canada or in England, that Jews lived side by side with their neighbors, their Christian neighbors, and so forth. And nobody looks at it. How's that possible? Or it's surprising. I mean, it is so sorrowful that we have to look and with surprise at the fact that we were able to coexist. But this was, of course, the natural and given that and that we were living together, Jews and Muslims, in the same courtyards, and it was no problem whatsoever. And this was until the advent with this Zionist movement, which was a movement to co-opt, to take over the land as a nationalist movement under the name of this Jewish people. And again, we keep on reiterating, the Torah expressly, this is forbidden in every aspect, because of both. We're not allowed to have our own state, and we're not, of course, allowed to steal. And especially, Jews are extremely thankful because when we through our history of these hundreds and hundreds of years, unfortunately there was blood libels that said that Jews killed Christians to drink their blood. Oh, just crazy! I mean, unbelievable things that is totally against the Torah. We're not allowed to drink blood. Then there's the tried to force conversion of Jews in the Inquisition, with Jews were burnt, tortured, and burnt at the stake. The Crusades, and what did Jews do? They were expelled from many of the European lands, and they turned and they were embraced by the Muslim lands, the Muslim leaders, the Muslim countries, the Muslim people, and we went there and we flourished as distinctly religious Jews among distinctly religious Muslim people. We flourished. You can go still to all these countries, whether it be Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Yemen, Iran. You go to all the countries, Lebanon, wherever it may be in Palestine, and you'll see the cemeteries, the old synagogues. You see that Jews had a flourishing community. We put out our greatest scholars there, and we were embraced and given a safe haven and helped to grow. And therefore, now Zionism came with their agenda of stealing the land, the self-rule of the Palestinians, and being that they're being opposed by these indigenous people and their relatives and friends from other lands, and therefore, so they right away accuse the people who oppose them as being villains, as being anti-Semitic. There's something so repugnant to that, so repulsive. We reject that. We as Jews, because we're Jews, we say that God commands a Jew to show gratitude for good done to us. And we do show gratitude. We yearn to show our thankfulness to the people of Palestine and the Muslim people. And with one sweep of the hand, the Zionists are coming and saying they're all hating Jews because they're Muslims. We are standing in opposition and saying this is false, patently false, wrong. We cannot accept it. Therefore, we're out there speaking up and saying our hearts cry, and we sympathize and we are in solidarity with the Palestinians to have a free Palestine. God help speedily and peacefully. Our hearts, we out there, and we will not let people speak in our name and try to usurp the rulership and the ownership of that land that belongs to the Palestinian people. We are here to both to speak out and to try our best to bring about this removal of this impediment to peace, this foreign interloper, this Zionist movement, the ones who have come, this group who are trying to destroy this fabric of the Holy Land, this coexistence. We are just voices of our brothers and sisters in Palestine. There's hundreds of thousands of Jews there who are remaining loyal to this Palestinian people who they've been residing together with for hundreds of years. We are their voice. We are the voice of the world Jewry around the world who are true to the religion. You can look at our site. We have many, many pictures. You can see on nkusa.org. You can see and the hundreds of pictures of Jews demonstrating in the thousands, in the tens of thousands in Palestine and around the world in their opposition to the existence of this illegitimate, unacceptable state. You can see these pictures, but you can also see something which is really, really surprising and that the world doesn't know. That when we demonstrate, and we're never militant, we don't have any arms, but when we demonstrate, we are brutally beaten in Palestine. Our rabbis have been assassinated for this well over, and now it is over 100 years through our history when we stood up against opposition against the Zionists. The world doesn't see, is deaf and mute to this. We are beaten, arrested, tortured, and assassinated, our rabbis. And there is the documentation of this again on our site. We have that the rabbis spoke out from day one in a book called The Rabbis Speak Out. The Rabbis Speak Out is a compilation of all the rabbinical authorities around the world of opposition against Zionism. But then you can look at the compilation of documentation and pictures of how the people who stood up were beaten and tortured, arrested, and assassinated. Now, if you will go to I believe you can Google now on the alternative media. Again, regular media doesn't report this either because they're owned by Zionists or intimidated by the Zionists, like they have AIPAC and Media Watch and all these ways that they accuse people of being anti-Semitic if somebody stands up and reports against what what the Zionists do. But if you look at the
Oh.
alternative media, you will find that today the latest issue is they're trying to force Jews who are religious, who are anti-Zionist, because of our religion. We cannot accept this state, and they're trying to force our youth, the boys and girls, our teenagers, into their army because they have a draft. Now, till
Huh.
now, the many times, like the Zionist the government understood that it's impossible to force these religious Jews to go and serve in their army because it's understandable. We won't go rebel against God. This is our life, our religion. But so they've turned a blind eye to the fact that the religious don't go and serve in their army. But Netanyahu, with his hubris, with his chutzpah, we say in Judaism, and in his evil ways, has decided to crack down and try to force this youth into the military. And there's tremendously large demonstrations. You can see Jews being brutally beaten, attacked, tear gassed, and other ways in the streets of Jerusalem and in Palestine. Look at that and you Google it and you will find it. Tens of thousands of Jews that are constantly being arrested in masses that break into these Jewish homes in the middle of the night. This is ongoing. We are suffering together with the Palestinians under this villainous and evil government against the state, under the state of Israel.
Wow, that was very well said. It's kind of unfortunate that the bad apples in our religions are the ones that are most vocal, and they're the ones people believe them to be the true forebearers of our religion. Like example, like when you mention the Judaism and Zionism is the radical movement. For Islam, it's maybe you probably already know it's ISIS and all those extremist and terrorist groups. So let's say because of Zionism, what does the Jewish community, what kind of challenges and difficulties does the Jewish community face? Like you've already mentioned about the terrible massacres and beatings during the peaceful protests. Is there anything that might happen, let's say in the West, to a Jewish community?
Oh, well, I have Rabbi Feldman standing here, who's a vast fountain of knowledge, and I just really taking over the mic, and he's been in London very often, and so other parts of the world. Rabbi Feldman, to speak about, I believe in Manchester, the attacks the Jews in London. Besides what we have here, maybe you'd like to talk about.
Well, exactly. Like starting with New York. Even in New York, we have many occasions that the Zionists would try to pressurize in each and every way that they can manage to do. I was in Canada. It was not too long ago. Mm-hmm. It was a couple of years ago when I think it was one of those Gaza wars, and we spoke on a demonstration in support of Gaza, and then after we spoke, we came down from the podium to the front of the crowd, and then those violent pro-Zionists came over with cameras, and they said they're going to take pictures of us and publicize them and try to intimidate us. Now, we are used to all of this, and that's okay, but they are trying each and every way they can to put pressure, to intimidate, and even to harass people in order to silence them. Now, as Rabbi Weiss said, this happens in occupied Palestine by the Israeli government on a large scale, but it does happen in many other parts of the world as well. What Rabbi Weiss mentioned before about England, there were many incidents in England where individual people were badly attacked for their simple participation in anti-Zionist rallies. There's an individual rabbi in Manchester, England, that was numerous times attacked. His apartment, his car, and many other ways. There was one of our affiliate synagogues in London that were vandalized more than once because of our activities. Now, these kind of things happen all the time, but we need strong people not to give in and to uphold what we strongly believe in, which in our case is the preservance of our religion and the voice of our people. And if I may, I'll tell you a very cute story, it's a very sad one,
Mm-hmm.
but it shows an example what is happening here and how people are threatened under this pressure. It's a very close friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Who he is one of two partners in a huge big company in New York City. I'm not going to mention the name, but this individual comes over to me once and he says, "I'll do whatever I can to support you and support your activities," and he does support us financially. But he said, "There's no way I can join you in public because if I join you in public, one picture will be taken of me and they would publicize it. I close my company the same day," which is unfortunately in some cases is true. Now, but all these intimidations shows how difficult it is for people to stand up, and it can explain how, when you do see, for example, you might see many pictures of thousand Jewish people coming out. On some occasions, you can see even many thousands. There's a famous picture of just a couple of months ago, 20,000 people in New York City. Those are the people who take the courage to come out. But you can imagine how many more are behind those people that, for one reason or another, they uh, don't feel secure enough to come out in public and oppose this movement of Zionism, the state of Israel.
I'd like to add to that what Rabbi Feldman is saying is that they're the voice of Judaism. It's inherent because we are religious. It is automatic that the more we're religious, the more we know our religion, the more we practice it, the more we are true to the religion. We stand in opposition to Zionism because it's two diametric opposites. It is contradictory. But the ones who can speak out are people who ignore this threat, and it's very hard for a regular a person to ignore the threats, the physical and other intimidations of the Zionism. And if it wouldn't be for these threats of the Zionists, and they know that very well, that's why they put us under threat and they attack us, because if it wouldn't be for that, there would be hundreds of thousands and who would be opposing them on the streets in the Holy Land, in Palestine, and throughout the world. Around the United States, we have Jewish communities, religious communities, and wherever we go, and we go to different states, we try to educate people about this, we go to universities, we go to communities, and people approach us, people call us, and they say, "Oh, we stand with you, but we cannot speak out because they get targeted by the Zionists." We in New York are insulated because I mentioned earlier, right across from Manhattan, we have the most largest concentration of religious Jews in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and there's not one Israeli flag, miles and miles of religious community. Anybody can see it right across from Manhattan. When you come to visit Manhattan, go through it, you'll see like you're going back in time because everybody dresses modestly and it's a religious community. But there's not one Israeli flag. Because we are religious, we stand in opposition to Zionism. So we are insulated. We have our schools there, and the community. We have our stores and everything. So a Jew doesn't have to stand face to face with the Zionist intimidation as much. But in other areas, if somebody speaks out against Zionism, they get targeted. In fact, even the one in New York, and we can't ignore the fact that we get death threats. We've been targeted. Our synagogue has been attacked. My tires have been slashed, and we all get targeted. The rabbis in Palestine have been assassinated, and I should really mention that the chief rabbi in 1920s. Remember, the state was ratified by the United Nations in 1948. But in the 1920s, Zionism was starting to build. The chief rabbi at the time was Rabbi Sonnenfeld, and he was a very holy man and represented the chief rabbi of the Jewish people, and he met with the king of Transjordan. Again, I refer you to our site, to Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism. You will see he wrote letters in the Arab papers in Arabic, and he met with the king of Transjordan. He met with other of the Arab leaders to express our loyalty to the Muslims and to the Arab people, that we have no aspiration for statehood, for taking over the land from them. And in 1947, that's a year before the United Nations ratified the state, The chief rabbi, because he had passed away, this Rabbi Sonnenfeld, and Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Dushinsky was the one who was given the great position of chief rabbi of Palestine, of Jerusalem, and he wrote and he met with the delegation of the United Nations in 1947, the delegation that was sent to feel out the area, see what has to be done, and he pleaded with them, and I'm quoting him this is from the United Nations documents in July 16th, 1947. He said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. We furthermore wish to express," that means the Jewish people, our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. Unfortunately, this delegation, with the works of the Shatan, of the Satan,
Yeah.
it can be any other reason for this doesn't have a proper explanation, because the majority of people were Muslim who were living there in Palestine, and then there was the Christian populace, and the small was the Jews. And from the Jews, as I mentioned earlier, the populace of hundreds of years were anti-Zionist. They were 95% in 1917 where they were anti-Zionist. So to create a Zionist state by United Nations that's there to bring peace to the world, that's of democracy and the will of the humanity, and to go and make a Jewish state that should be under the control of a minority, under a religious, it really just doesn't make any sense. But that's the fact. So it was ratified against the will of this community, and he pleaded with the United Nations. This same Rabbi Dushinsky, 4 months later, he sent a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and he wrote, and I'm quoting him, in November 18th, 1947, he wrote, "The Jewish Orthodox community of Jerusalem, comprising 60,000 souls, objects to the plea of including Jerusalem in the Jewish state, or its residents becoming automatically citizens of the Jewish state. Our community demands that Jerusalem be an international zone under protection with full autonomy, and its residents be free citizens of the international zone of Jerusalem." Now, mind you, it wasn't that he was. I have to mention that they were very willing and able and wanting to be under the rule of the Palestinian people, loyal to the indigenous people, and this plea was only to leave out Jerusalem from the Zionist control, and of course that the whole state of Israel is unacceptable according to us. And he was just saying, at least take the tentacles off us in the meantime, Jerusalem. But not that, of course, that he was saying it was unacceptable in any manner of the state being anywhere else, obviously, and not that he was saying that it shouldn't be in the Palestinian rule. And this is the Jewish view, and it's something which really has to be stated. I can say that it's just weird that you will find that if anybody gets attacked of the Zionists or something, right away it's a big scandal, and the government stand up and try to find who the one who did this act. But at the same time, the rabbis in London, who Rabbi Feldman was speaking about, they was shot bullets in his home. His cameras by the British government around his home, and yet nobody has been arrested or anything. And in any other part of the world, we don't seem to find that any of these Zionist attacks seem to bring to any results, while the ones who stand up against Zionism are constantly intimidated and attacked. But we still say, we insist, whether there is a large voice or a small voice, and even if it would be no voice, Zionism cannot in any manner, shape, or form represent a religion, just like atheism cannot represent a religion. It's two congruous issues. Everybody would understand that Buddhism is not Judaism, and you can't call it Buddhist Judaism. You can't call it Zionist Judaism. It's that's incompatible. It is not a voice of Judaism. They're hijacking and abusing our religion. It happens to be, thank God, that we do have a voice, and we have the hundreds of thousands of Jews around the world who, the very religious, are in opposition to Zionism, and there is, thank God, a voice that's still out there, and we can't help, we will not be silenced, that we are out there in opposition to the existence of the state. We pray for a speedy and peaceful and total dismantlement of the state. We are out there with God's help.
Inshallah, that will come true by God's will. I was wondering, this is kind of a question coming from me personally, does anti-Semitism come from this Zionist movement?
you know, it's like you're throwing a beautiful a soft pitch into a strike zone. That's good questions, because it gives us the opportunity to state that it is so so ironic that supposedly they speak that they're here to protect us from anti-Semitism when they are the greatest exacerbator of anti-Semitism in the world. So we should step back and think. I've mentioned earlier that Jews had communities in all the Muslim countries. We coexisted. We are, as the Muslim people in the Muslim religion, are told to protect and respect the Jewish people, and that's clear. And Jews did live there, and we flourished in these countries. Today, you look around, you'll find there's barely Jewish communities there, and we are very thankful to Iran and Morocco and Tunisia and all the lands, that they tried to protect and give, and help the Jews and help them flourish. But the fact of the matter is, Zionism has caused this rift, this suspicion of Jews, and Jews felt unsafe in many cases, and they left. So Zionism has exacerbated anti-Semitism a thousandfold, and it has caused, and even in Europe and around the world, it is a fact on the ground that Zionism has created anti-Semitism. Netanyahu, their hubris, the leader of the Zionist state, marched into France after the terrible massacre there, and he said Jews should come to Palestine. He said Jews should come to Israel, and he was told even by the French people there, who was probably Zionists. They said you're a person non grata now, and they did it a persona non grata because they don't, he took a step too far. But he wants that everybody should, of course, and that's what Zionism does. They try to create havoc in other parts of the world for the Jews, and then the Jews, they say, oh, come on, to our state, and you will have your insurance land and your policy land, a place for a safe haven, and it's absolutely necessary because of anti-Semitism. It's the comparative, the metaphor to somebody who's taken as a guest into a home and sets the house on fire, and then yells fire, fire, and saves a child. And the other people die, God forbid, and they look at him as a hero because he saved the child. He set the house on fire. Set the world on fire, with this between people, humanities, and especially against the Jewish people. And then they try to claim the right to the name as Jewish saviors and heroes of the Jews and protectors of the Jews. We say to the bee, don't give us your honey and don't give us your sting. This is it's a rebellion against God. Even if it would be a good place for the Jews, theoretically, it cannot be acceptable. The Torah forbids a state. The Torah forbids to steal. It's all wrong, and it just happens ironically to be that the greatest creator of anti-Semitism throughout the world, without a doubt, without any question.
Well, that's very interesting. Thank you for answering my question. Through all the events that are happening around the world, all this chaos, hate and fear, and misrepresentations of religion, do you believe it's a sign for something?
Well, we're here to present facts on the ground. In fact, we have a rabbi who says he's reluctant a lot of times even to speak about, the solution to things, but because the first thing you have to present the truth, and the truth is Zionism is diametrically opposite from Judaism. It's not the same, and so that's what we're here to do. We're not prophets. We don't know what will be, but we know the rules of the Torah is that one has to be introspective. When things happen, we have to try to figure out what God rules the world. All good and things that look evil, everything is from God to remind us to better our ways. And that's what we have to do in every case and see how we can serve him better. And we pray in our prayers every year, the high holidays, that God should put in the hearts and soul and the minds of the leaders of the world, kings and rulers, that they should strive for peace throughout the world. So we have to be introspective, see how we have to better ourselves. Zionism is definitely one of the things that has to, with God's help, be removed from the equation, from the harmonic coexistence of Jews and Muslims and the holy and Christians in the Holy Land. That is like the piece of sand that's put in an eye that's agitating and irritating the eye. and the way of peace, the road to peace would be, God help, the speedy and peaceful removal of this foreign object that's trying to claim that it's part of the religions that were there these hundreds of years, which it's not. It's a political, flawed, unacceptable movement. That has to be removed. So, that, and once the world recognizes that this is a foreign interloper, that it is not the religion that they claim to represent, it's simply a selfish, flawed movement that started around 130 years ago. It's a fact. And that the rabbinical authorities around the world stood in opposition, so they have no right to speak in the name. And as I mentioned, the community of Jews in Palestine were not Zionists. They were Jews who were practicing religion. And we don't want this. So then the world would put pressure, then it can be removed, just like you see that people didn't believe that there could be a solution in South Africa, and they were ruling so long, and they were given the respect as a respectful state amongst the nations, the United Nations. But then it was stopped with the pressure of people, of humanity, of the grassroots, and it was put on pressure, and it was finally the ones who were were called the terrorists, Nelson Mandela and so forth, were recognized as the ones who had the truthful opinion, and the state of South Africa was the apartheid ended, and so forth. So you can see examples that something that seems impossible to end can be ended. This state of Israel it's a fledgling state. It's new. It has to be ended. And with God's help, speedily and peacefully, with the other states in the United Nations and so forth. And here we have the issue of Jerusalem. Now, we as a Jew are required to be respectful citizens in every land that we reside. We always speak to our president with respect. And we plead to him. He predicated this speech about Jerusalem, of making the embassy in Jerusalem. He said, he's striving for a way of peace. All the other efforts throughout the years brought to more, to nothing, to violence, no light at the end of the tunnel. We say it's because as long as the state exists, it's a rebellion against God. In the Torah it says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. We are happy with every inch given to the Palestinians, but we can never be satisfied with even 1 inch of the existence of the state of Israel. So 2 states weren't acceptable. We were happy with what's given to the Palestinians. But he said all these solutions that looked so promising when they were brought to the table, he said all the others didn't work. So he wants to start speaking about moving Jerusalem as the de facto capital of Israel. So he's going to move the embassy there. So we plead with him respectfully and say, look at history. History is a very, very the greatest teacher, one of the greatest teachers you can have. History shows our hundreds of years of coexistence. So it proves that the world was flat wrong, was totally wrong in thinking that this is a Jewish-Muslim conflict. There's nothing to do with religion. And the solution is just the opposite, the contrary. It's the villain is not the villain, and the victim is not the victim. The way the world portrays it, it's just the opposite. And, the Palestinians here are the victims, and to make a statement of giving Israel this legitimacy and Jerusalem as its capital when the whole state is unacceptable means that, of course, that Jerusalem is unacceptable to be its capital, obviously, because the whole state is unacceptable. Now, the road to peace would be, on the contrary, to work and to remove this whole concept of this flawed, unacceptable ruling over the land under the state of Israel. A free Palestine is the solution, and God help, I stress, one of my great teachers, he should have long and healthy years, a person who lived through the Holocaust, and one of the orators and writers against Zionism who lived in Palestine many, many years, Rabbi Beck, says, I'm reluctant to look for solutions and give solutions. He said, because whatever you don't think it will work out or something, then you'll say that the whole subject that I broached of the unacceptability of Zionism, you'll say is also flawed. Well, the fact is that Zionism is unacceptable according to Judaism. It's against the Torah. It's a rebellion against God in every aspect. And the solution is definitely, with God's help, the end of this speedy and peaceful end of this occupation. But you may think that the road that I'm saying is not right. But I humbly believe that, as I say, history is our teacher. And the fact of the ground is, if you believe in God, if you follow God's will, and logically, if you will remove this impediment to peace, it will bring peace. This is something that you've seen in other countries, as I say, in South Africa, but it's something which, if we've gone to Gaza, you can look at we have pictures of this. We've been embraced by the leadership there. But we are non-political. We met with President Abbas. We've met with the Iranian leaders and with the leaders of other countries in Lebanon, and we've gone to all many different in Yemen and the many different Arab and Muslim countries. They all embrace us and say they have nothing against Judaism. It is easily remedied, we hold, with God's help, by just simply removing this agitator, somebody who's trying to oppress the indigenous people. Remove this unacceptable Zionist state of Israel, and the people want peace. The people who are living in Palestine, the Jewish people, want peace also. And if you humbly approach the people of the Muslim populace and the leadership, the Jewish people, there is enough place to give them homes without stealing the Palestinian land, and we hope, with God's help, that way we'll be able to coexist. Now, the ones who feel in danger, because they've carried out interrogations, and the ones in the Israeli army. So we're talking of these thousands of people. Let other states, the United States and Canada, let them offer them, their citizenship, that they should go there. And so it costs a few billions of dollars. It's cheaper than the billions of dollars that are infused every year to the Israeli military, and for them to build walls and Patriot missiles and who knows what everything they can think of tomorrow, which has a never end in sight. And this does have an end in sight, because we both believe in one God. We can live together. We always have lived together. We will live together with God's help. The Zionists, you should know, approach everyone who stands in their opposition. They come to our demonstrations, as Rabbi Feldman mentioned. They stick cameras in our faces. They show our pictures in order that they try to find, if every demonstration, invariably people lose their jobs. Why? Because they take pictures of everybody, and then they look and they see, oh, he's working for a certain business, and they'll start putting pressure on these businesses that they should fire these people. They go. The newspapers, whoever, as I mentioned earlier, they refuse, if somebody shows a little sympathy for Palestine, or reports a Palestinian activity with sympathetic lens, or what we're doing is reported. The hundreds and hundreds of times we have demonstrations, or maybe so many thousands, and we have tens of thousands of people demonstrating. It gets reported. These papers are threatened that they're going to have the advertisement stopped. And I'm just giving examples what they do. If this would be, if it wouldn't be for these intimidations, or the vilification, or the simple dismissal of these Jewish communities that we have as a non-voice, they keep on reporting that the Jewish voice, this respectable voice of the people of Palestine, of Jerusalem, the respectable voice of the backyard of our president in New York here, the very large communities that are true to Judaism, that states that Jewish state is not acceptable. If our voice would be heard, and instead of listening to this the choir of the Zionists that keep on ridiculing and dismissing us, and realizing that this is just a voice of evil what they're doing, then we'd be able to have peace. Peace can be attained. It's not unreachable. It can be done. And it will be done eventually, because it's the will of God. And even statistically, it doesn't make sense, the state of Israel. Down the road, not too far, you're going to have more Muslim people. And this is maybe why Sharon decided to leave Gaza, because you have, not that they left it entirely, of course they have control there, but they wanted to sort of cut it out of the voting rights, because they had 1.5 million Muslims living there. And now they're voting. Eventually, there's going to be more Arabs voting, and a bigger populace of Muslims. Now, why should they have to swear allegiance to the so-called Jewish state? It doesn't make sense. It defies logic. They're going to be the minority, and add to that the voice of the Jews, who are, thank God, growing in leaps and bounds, the religious Jews, to our Judaism. So they are becoming outnumbered. It's an illogical, illegitimate state. It doesn't have a future. The reason really behind it doesn't have a future is because, again, because it's against the will of God. It's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
But even logically, you can see that the only solution is the end of the occupation. It sounds radical, but it is the proper way, and that will be the peaceful route, the way to stop this endless river of bloodshed, of exacerbation of anti-Semitism, the end of the repercussions of this hate and rift between Jews and Muslims, and therefore and other people and Muslims, all because of this beginning of this agitator in Jerusalem and Palestine. So that is the true way to peace in the world. Instead of being intimidated, should step up to the plate, and we will have peace with God's help.
Wow, there's so much hope in what you said, and so much light that you've brought onto this topic. We thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to hear from you. I think to close off, I would like to ask if you were to give anyone advice to help them stand up for what they believe in, but it's being threatened by something or someone, what advice would you give them?
Well, first, remember, there's the Almighty who rules the world.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pray to him with his compassion to bring a speedy and peaceful end to all this hate and strife around the world. God is compassionate. And on all the people around the world, the terrible suffering all over. And in our case here in Palestine, a speedy and peaceful end to this Zionist state of Israel. God should help. And so we were looking forward as Jews to be able to present the Palestinians with their freedom, their respect, and so forth, and apologize profusely what's happening. We urge people not to confuse the two. Don't call it a Jewish state, because right away that gives the aura like a feeling of anti-Semitism. That's exactly what Zionists want. That you should refer to as the Jews and the Jewish state. Mm-hmm. And so differentiate between the two. The Iranian government usually is they're very careful calling it the Zionist state. That's why the Zionists like to vilify them so much. And we urge people to spread our word. Whenever you see our thing, spread it as much as you can to the people of Palestine and the Muslim world and around. And we urge people to invite us. We don't charge because we feel it's our godly mission to bring us to campuses, to universities, to Muslim centers, etc. around the world, and inform us of things, inform Muslim conferences and so forth, to call us, that they should call us, because the more we educate people, it gives the people, and they understand that it's not a religious issue, it gives them the confidence to speak up to Palestine. There's many human rights activists for issues, but they're afraid to speak up for Palestine. They don't want to be tainted with the name anti-Semitic. But if we can give them the confidence, the backbone, knowing that so many, the very religious oppose it, they will be more confident to speak up for Palestine. Urge conferences and so forth to call us. Let us know of conferences of issues for Palestine around the world, and help us spread the word, give us information, send us information of interesting issues of the past and documents and so forth. Send it to us to NKUSA, and let's keep in touch. And God help, we will be successful, because the Almighty, we are the power, because the Almighty is the power of the world. So it looks like we're minority. Don't get daunted. God will accomplish, but we, as God is righteous and just, He wants us to stand up. So help us stand up. Let us all stand up for the freedom of Gaza, of Palestine. Let us cry and feel with the Palestinians and celebrate together with the free Palestine.
Well, that's very good advice that you've given to many people. And again, we at the team of the Double Digit podcast, we are deeply grateful that you guys came on, that you gave so much light and hope on this usually overlooked topic. And like me myself, I've learned so much from listening to you two, and I thank you greatly. And we want to let you know that we are on your side. We want to stop this as well, and it's just wonderful seeing so much. I can't put this in words, how much I've been enlightened today. Thank you so much again. And I think I want to close off with a saying that inshallah, you continue your wonderful, wonderful movement, and by God's will, will this atrocity end.
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Alaikum salam. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on, and we hope to hear you from another time, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Oh, and to everyone listening to the podcast, make sure to check out their website, nkusa.org, and make sure to check out their books as well. Shalom alaikum, everyone, and see you next time.